So thank you for choosing to be with us today. Thank you for participating in this center, in this time and place that we get to play in. And we're delighted you chose to spend your time with us today. We know you have lots of choices. And it's a new month, August, and we start a new theme, connection. What is it? And that's also today's talk title. One of the things that's been so challenging for a lot of people over these last 17 months is not feeling connected with each other because they haven't been able to be physically close to friends or relatives that don't reside in their households. This has been a very tangible physical experience for a lot of people. And what I'm going to say might be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. There's not a word of truth in it. And some of you may remember where that phrase came from. It's a story of Vetura Papke, one of Ernest Holmes' practitioners, one that he trained and that he actually used as a practitioner, who had a practitioner session with a woman who was going on and on and on about all the stuff that wasn't working right in her life. And during the practitioner session, Vetura just kept muttering to herself. And finally, the woman stopped her and said, "You're not listening to me. You're talking." And Vetura calmly looked at her and said, "Oh, I am listening. And there's not a word of truth in what you're saying. There's not a word of truth in it." And we do this. We do this all the time. We get so sideways having our experiences in life that we forget that the experiences are not and do not and cannot represent the truth. So what is the truth about connection? In the Hindu philosophy and religion, which Ernest Holmes was very, very fond of, he studied that a lot, there are 4 primary yogas, or pathways to enlightenment, or ways to remember or reenact our unity with the divine. And different people will resonate with one path more than the others. All paths are equally valid, and they're not mutually exclusive. The 4 pathways are suitable for different individuals' psychological preferences, and they are emotional, intellectual, physical, and meditative, kind of spiritual, but not really. So emotional, intellectual, physical, and meditative are spiritual. In the emotional path, bhakti, it's the path of devotion, the path of attaining a relationship and a remembrance of the divine by loving each and by loving all. This is the common pathway that most religions and belief systems follow because in a way, it's the easiest to relate to. You could say that as humans, we're wired for love, we're wired for relationships, and we're wired for relating to another based on our experience of love. This is what's at the core of the Namaste greeting. The divine love in me salutes the divine love in you. And it's also completely human nature to screw this one up because we think love needs to look a certain way or feel a certain way and be returned to us in a certain way by certain specific people, or it's not real love. We do this. We do this all the time. And when we do it, we miss the key point. God is love. We are of God, and so we are love too. The second pathway, jnana, is the path of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. This pathway is not about book learning, which is the typical way we talk about intellectual understanding. It's about knowing, and knowing that we know, without doubt, without anxiety, without fear, without any second guessing on our part. This knowing, Brahman, the highest universal principle, the ultimate reality, and Atman, the individual transcendent self, which is already immortal and already immutable and already part of the Godhead. It's pure awareness, and it lives in us. So Brahman, our view of universal reality, and Atman, that part of Brahman that lives in us, are already intertwined, already connected, already part of the same. And we have to remember and know and believe and trust that our individualized selves and this divine essence are not separate and can't be separate, which is to say, already completely and totally connected. From this perspective, all duality, all experience of duality, all experience of separateness is just ignorance. We forgot. This pathway of yoga gives us the idea that the world of our experience, this thing that's out in front of us, in front of our eyes, is Maya, it's illusion. And the truth of it is not what we see with our eyes, it's what we understand in our minds and our consciousness in our Atman when we remember to look there. And in the science of mind teaching, all experience, all things in the world of form are just effects. And they're created by us because of our beliefs in them and because of the collectively held beliefs that all the inhabitants of the world hold. Because these are effects, not causes, every single one of them can be changed when we change our point of view about them. This is not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. And it's within every one of us to have the ability already to be able to change our way of seeing whatever is going on in the world and recognize that connectedness, recognize that unitive consciousness, that oneness that exists between us and all of these experiences in front of our eyes. One of the delightful aspects of the Jnana pathway is that we affirm what actually is the real truth about ourselves. We're not limited by our bodies or our individualized minds or our individual experiences. We are already Atman, the spiritual self that was never born and will never die. We're already pure, perfect, eternal, and free. We don't know it. We've bought into that collectively held belief and programmed ourselves to think of ourselves as puny, weak, pitiful, helpless, lacking, broken, victims. And remember, there's not a word of truth in it. Getting a hold of that awareness of we are Atman, we are whole, we are already divine. And remembering to see ourselves and everyone else as emanations of the divine takes intentional practice, constant intentional practice, in remembering, in knowing, in reviewing and seeing the world with those eyes. And those of you that are experienced in the science of mind teaching may recognize a lot of the basic science of mind principles in these two forms of Hindu yoga practice. Holmes studied and contemplated the Hindu scriptures a lot. The night that he transitioned, he had been reading, as was his nightly practice, Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine. It's 1,107 pages of dense, cryptic, complicated writing. There are no cliff notes. Actually, there are. The science of mind text is likely as close as any of us are going to get to cliff notes for this book, because it's exploring the world of the divine in form. There are two more Hindu pathways of connection in the one mind, and they are going to be somewhat familiar to you, I think. Karma yoga is the pathway of service or dedicated work. We tend to like this pathway because we think we understand it. But do we do our service? Do we do our work without any expectation of praise, respect, honor, appreciation, or recognition? Well, that's kind of hard, right? Any expectation is a trap and results in disappointment because neither we nor anyone else can live up to our expectations. So we've kind of set ourselves in a place that doesn't work. And it's not that that karma yoga doesn't work, the pathway of service doesn't work. It's what we've put on top of it, that we expect feedback to come a certain way. In Dr. Edward Viljoen's retelling of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, I recommend that you quiet your mind and fix your thoughts on me as the best way for you. But if you can't, then learn to do so through the regular practice of meditation. And if you lack the will for such self-discipline, then practice selfless service. If you can't do this, then practice being unattached to the results of your actions and do everything for me. Understanding your own actions is better than doing something for the sake of doing it or because you must do it. The path of karma yoga, the path of service or work, is to do absolutely everything you do as a gift to the divine, whether anybody knows about it or values it or thinks it's important or worthwhile or not. So we do and we don't have an understanding of this path of service and work because we like to be told we're doing a good job, right? It's human and it catches us. The fourth pathway of connection to the divine is the path of Raja Yoga, or meditation. This is the pathway of mastering the mind. When we master our mind, we don't let it run wild. We realize we remember our divine nature. Representing this as a separate path is really a bit of a trick because the path of meditation, the practice of meditation, is embedded and inherent in all pathways to God, or oneness, or unity consciousness, whatever name you choose to use. And when I say master the mind, I don't actually mean rigidly controlling it. I mean not allowing our awareness to be hijacked by all of the many juicy, wonderful, horrible, delightful, anxious, anticipatory, fearful, enthusiastic thoughts that constantly run through our minds. I love Pema Chodron's meditation practice for this purpose. When a thought arises, whatever it is, whether good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever, distracting, she names it. She says, oh, thought. And she says, just let it go on by. Let it flow without grabbing it. Let it flow without being pulled off track by it. Let it flow by like a leaf on a stream or a cloud in the sky. And don't find yourself going down a rabbit hole, chasing that thought. So the practice of meditation is not mastering your mind. It's mastering your ability to stay on target. So what's true about all four of these Hindu yogic paths? Do any of them actually change the individual's connection to or with or in the divine? I'll answer my own question. Not even. No, they don't. The only thing they change is the individual's awareness of their connection to, with, and in that divine presence. The same is true in the science of mind philosophy. Every single one of us is already one in that all that is. And there's nothing we can actually do to screw that up. We're already intimately connected with that infinite presence that is closer than our breath, stronger and more dependable than our heartbeat. We forget, right? We are unconscious about the depth, permanence, and certainty of our connection in the one. And we mistakenly think we are alone and isolated. In the Science of Mind text on 156, paragraphs 3 and 4, Ernest Holmes wrote, "The entire world suffers from one big fear, the fear that God will somehow not answer our prayers. Let us analyze this fear, which possesses us, and see if it's true. This lack of fear is nothing more than the belief that God does not and will not supply us with whatever we need. The fear of death is the belief that the promises of eternal life may not be true. The fear of loss of health, friends, property, all arise from the belief that God is not all that we claim: omniscience, omnipotent, and omnipresent. But what is fear? Nothing more or less than the negative use of faith. Faith misplaced, a belief in two powers instead of one, a belief that there can be a power opposed to God, whose influence and ability may bring us evil." And then in the same text from page 404, paragraphs 3 and 4, fear blocks the most complete givingness of the Spirit. Fear arises from that mental attitude which limits the possibility and the willingness of Spirit to give us the good we so greatly desire. To overcome fear is the greatest adventure in the mind of humanity. If our greatest fear is that we're separate, alone, and isolated from the divine and from each other, how do we overcome that fear? Faith and trust in God, in each other, faith in ourselves. Remember from the Science of Mind text, page 33, paragraph 3, when we learn to trust the universe, we shall be happy, prosperous, and well. What do we have to give up in order to accomplish this? What do we have to give up in order to accomplish giving up this fear and this doubt and this uncertainty? We have to give up our pity parties. We have to give up our thinking small about ourselves, thinking we're unimportant or ineffectual. We have to actually accept that we are already of God. We are already Atman. We are already connected at the core of our being. We are already emanations of the divine, and there's nothing we have to do to make that happen. It's already done. We are here because we have something to do, because it delights us, it pleases us, and inspires us. Because we want to be here and we want to express this divine presence that shows up as us. Does that change the way you look at connection? Does that change the way you look at your experience in the world? Knowing we are already of God. We are already Atman. We are already connected to the core of our being and the divine and each other. Does that change your view? It's a big idea. It's once again, simple, but not easy. Because anytime we tell ourselves a story that's different than that, we're making something up and there's not a word of truth in it. There's our challenge. There's our task, to remember our connectedness to the all that is, and to show up as that in our lives as often as we can manage it. So I want to close with a passage that includes today's spiritual thought from 365 Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, page 213. If I honor myself alone, not realizing I am one with the divine presence, then I shall quickly exhaust the small portion of good that I, as a human being, can have at any one moment. But if I honor the presence of God in me, of God around and through me, of God in and through everything, then I am indeed honoring the presence of God. For one spirit is over all, in all, and through all, and that one presence is all. There can be no separation from this presence, no apartness, no division. There is one, complete and total, equally distributed and everywhere available. To feel this presence in things, in people, in human events, and to sense that it is all inclusive is to honor God and to provide in one's own self a place from which the divine can go forth into creation. Today, I honor the presence of God. I sleep in peace and wake in joy and live in the consciousness of good. Seeing God in others, I enter into companionship with the divine in all people. In the outstretched hand, in the smile of recognition, in the warm embrace of friends, I feel the one presence, the one power, the one life. And so I give thanks with a song in my heart and with a joy unspeakable. I give thanks to this presence. Remember, it's a practice and it's constant. As long as we're breathing, walking around on this earth, it's a constant practice. Recognize, honor, experience, explore, and express that divine connection in you with all, with the divine, with each other, with the weeds and the mountains and the rain and all of it. Stuff that you see as good, stuff that you see as difficult, all of it. We are intimately and infinitely connected with the all good. Do this. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So I want to go ahead and roll into the prayer. So if I said something that spoke to you and you want to incorporate it into your life, do that. Failing that, breathe in and out and make the exhale last a little longer and tell yourself you're safe. Tell yourself you're at ease. Tell yourself you're at home and connected while I speak the words. I remember this whole and holy presence that lives in me and as me, and I know it also lives in, as, through, and through each and all. And I know this divine presence, this one mind, this infinite possibility shows up as love and peace and power and joy and light. And it expresses through each of us, as each of us, when we remember our connection, when we remember our infinite potential, when we remember the possibility of life that lives in us, as us, through us, and wishes to express that great goodness toward ourselves, toward each other, and toward all of life. So I relax into this goodness. I know that it already has been given. I know that it already expresses. I know that it already shines in its brightness through each and all. And I celebrate this opportunity to gather and to know of this deep and profound connection that already exists in, as, and through each and all of life. And I celebrate this awareness. I bless each one who chose to show up today or watches this video at a later time, knowing each is already part of that one mind, that Brahman, that Atman, that infinite self, expressing as life and love and joy. And I know the practice also shows up as each one. And there's no way to do it wrong because God is love and so are we. So I bless this awareness and I celebrate in it and I relax into it. And I know it may take work on my part, but it's work of the possibly best kind. In great joy and delight, I relax into this goodness. I relax into this work, this joy, and I let it be. And so it is.